With the first pick in the 2023 NBA draft, the San Antonio Spurs select Victor Wembanyama. This is a no-brainer. The Spurs were the biggest winners of the draft lottery, acquiring a game-changing generational talent in Wembanyama. Victor is going to transform the Spurs franchise, which is now going to have its third consecutive big to build around. David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and now Victor Wembanyama is not bad at all. The Frenchman can do things that we've never seen before for a 7'5" big. He has legit handles, vision, and shooting off the dribble. And then, on the defensive side of the floor, he's going to be a perennial Defensive Player of the Year contender with how he patrols the rim and can also shut down smalls. Wembanyama is going to define the next decade for the Spurs, and I'm so excited to watch him in San Antonio. I'll have a full video on him very soon. With the second pick, the Charlotte Hornets select Scoot Henderson. This is also a no-brainer for me. I've long thought that Scoot is the clear number 2 prospect in this draft, and nothing has changed my mind. He's a master in the pick and roll and one of the best passers in the draft. Then he's also an incredible athlete in his own right with his length and explosiveness. Henderson can get into spaces that very few players can. In terms of improvement points, he's going to need to shoot and convert more threes still, but I'm not worried about this long term. His work from the mid-range more than puts me at ease. In terms of the fit next to LaMelo Ball, I'm convinced that it works. The ball doesn't stick to Melo, and we've seen him play with other ball handlers all of his life, including in Charlotte, for instance, Terry Rozier. Scoot is going to benefit from getting easy looks from 3, as well as the additional attention that defenses are bound to give LaMelo and others. He's flashed some signs as a cutter, having played off the ball at times for the G League Ignite with CD Sissoko, Pooh Jeter, or London Johnson. With the third pick, the Portland Trail Blazers select Asara Thompson. Maybe this is slightly surprising, but when I'm doing this mock draft, I'm taking team needs, history, and fit into account. I agree that Brandon Miller would also be a very nice fit next to Damian Lillard, but Portland's history really indicates this interest in hyper-athletic players from unconventional backgrounds. Shaedon Sharpe was the most recent example, but also Anthony Simons, Nasir Little, or Keon Johnson fit this mold. Aman's shooting is his Achilles heel right now, but he's a magnificent playmaker who has the potential to be one of the very best primary ball handlers in the NBA if everything hits. His athleticism and creativity are truly something. He's going to have to get more used to playing off the ball on offense, but I also really like this fit in Portland on defense. The Blazers will have a bunch of long 6'7", 6'8" guys buzzing around the floor to compensate for Damian Lillard's offensive load, and I think that a move like this with the men would also help take a little bit of defensive responsibility away from the Blazers' big as a result. With the fourth pick, the Houston Rockets select Cam Whitmore. Again, I'm slightly deviating from consensus here, but hear me out. The Rockets have their 2 guards of the future in Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. Then they've also got Josh Christopher in the background, who really should get more minutes going forward. Looking at their front court, it's pretty set with Jabari Smith Jr. and Alperen Şengün. With Smith in particular, he sort of fits the mold that Brandon Miller occupies, a big, versatile shooter who has a safe floor on defense. So instead, I feel like Houston could go for the home run pick here, and honestly, it's still pretty safe in Cameron Whitmore. The Villanova wing is gonna be a bucket getter in the NBA. He's not a creator for others, but Houston should have the pieces to have enough playmaking anyways. For me, Whitmore's offense is more versatile than Miller's. He's not as good of a shooter, but he'll probably self-create more, and he's gonna be a lot better at the rim and probably is a defender. With the fifth pick, the Detroit Pistons select Brandon Miller. In all honesty, I do think that this is more of a slide than what's going to happen in real life. but I think it makes sense as well. If these 4 prospects that I mentioned are off the board, Miller is then a perfect fit next to Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and Jalen Duren. In my opinion, those 3 guys are the centerpieces of Detroit's long-term project, so then you need to add more shooting around them. The Pistons know that this is a need for their team. It's previously why they targeted Isaiah Livers, for instance, so Brandon Miller spacing the floor and having threes created for him by 2 potential all-star guards is very appealing. It's not just that though, but with Ivey and Duren, he's not really going to have to put pressure on the rim, which is what he struggles at most right now. Then on defense, Brandon Miller is steady, he's going to be able to add size to Detroit's rotation and check NBA wings. He's not going to be a stopper probably, but he's safe and competitive on this side of the ball, and I think he'll be a good positional defender despite only being an okay athlete. With the 6th pick, the Orlando Magic select Asara Thompson. This is another pick that sort of goes back to draft history. We're all aware of what type of prospect Orlando loves, but beyond that, I think the fit here is great, and the Magic would be an awesome landing spot for the overtime elite product. Asar is a better shooter than his brother Amen, and he projects more like a wing who can also play on the ball rather than a primary ball handler. For me, that opens up more possible roles in the NBA. With the Magic in particular, he's going to be able to get set up by Markelle Fultz or Jalen Suggs, and then he'll feed off the pressure that Rookie of the Year Paolo Banchero generates. There won't be huge pressure for Asar to be a contributor right off the bat, although I do think that can happen on both ends of the floor. With this pick, the Magic would get an elite 2-way prospect who fits both their timeline and player preference. With the 7th pick, the Indiana Pacers select Jairus Walker. Walker is a monster defender with an NBA-ready frame who's going to be able to play the 4 and the small ball 5 in the league. Both of those are needs for Indiana. Jairus is a great complement to the Pacers' current roster. For one, he gives Tyrese Haliburton a new short roll partner in the pick and roll. Walker is an excellent passer in these situations who's able to scan the floor and make quick decisions. In this draft, he's probably the most NBA-ready prospect in this regard. Then Walker won't need to create too much for himself either with Haliburton next to him, but also with Ben Mathurin or Miles Turner getting plenty of that load. He can focus on being a connective piece on both ends rather than getting buckets. So if the Pacers can snag Walker at 7 next month, this would be one of my favorite pairings in the draft. With the 8th pick, the Washington Wizards select Anthony Black. The Wizards are in a decent spot in the draft at number 8, I feel. They can't really get access to the absolute elite prospects, but there's a lot of guys with wide ranges that they can absolutely tap into. Anthony Black's range isn't as extensive, but he's one of those early lottery guys that can potentially provide even higher value in the future. If this is their 8th pick, DC gets someone in Anthony Black who can potentially kinda link everything together for the Wizards. The Arkansas guard is a great connector, a reactive decision maker, and really just a total playmaker. He's always going to make himself felt on the floor, and NBA spacing will really help him. He's a better athlete than what he showed in college. Black shooting is going to have to come along, but maybe you're not too worried about that if you have Bradley Beal on your roster as his backcourt partner. Then on defense, Black has potential, he racks up steals and blocks, but he's still unstructured and he will have to lock in more often. With the 9th pick, the Utah Jazz select Wallace. I'm going with the best player available here for me, and that's Wallace out of Kentucky. I like Kaysen in the NBA for similar reasons to Anthony Black, although I think he's much more positional than his Arkansas counterparts. Wallace will only play the 1 or the 2, but he can play on and off the ball, which is good. That makes him malleable and gives him more roads to success in the league. He's a decent shooter, better than what he showed at Kentucky in my opinion, and Wallace is also a capable, crafty playmaker. Maybe he's not super creative, but he's very sturdy. Looking ahead towards the future, the Jazz don't really have a guard locked in long term, so I think picking Wallace here would be a great move. With the 10th pick, the Dallas Mavericks select Dereck Lively II. I have Lively slightly lower on my personal big board, but I am of the thinking that he can be a lottery pick. With Dallas drafting at 10, this is one of my favorite landing spots for the Duke center, and I think it's a legitimate possibility. The truth of the situation in Dallas right now is that unless your name is Luka Doncic or potentially Kyrie Irving, you're just not going to be getting a whole lot of shots. So maybe the Mavs could swing for a higher upside offensive player, but Lively can go the entire quarter without actually looking at the rim, and then his defensive potential is just tremendous. Like Wembanyama, he could be a perennial defensive player of the year contender, and I truly think that he can be as impactful as, for example, Rudy Gobert on this side of the floor for a team. Dallas is going to go all in on offense, so they need an elite defender to patrol the backline. Through Lively, they can get this in the draft. With the 11th pick, the Orlando Magic select Taylor Hendricks. This would potentially be a steal for Orlando, who would ensure that the Florida native stays at home after a breakout freshman year at UCF. The pitch for Hendricks is easy. He's a fluid 6'9", 6'10" forward who can block shots and space the floor at a high level. Now, he's still very raw, and part of Hendricks' appeal is that he's still so early on in his development that you can really play a part in molding him. But I think that's fine for the Magic. They're not in a rush for Hendricks to contribute immediately, and in the long term, I really like him next to Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero, as well as the front court options that Orlando has in Wendell Carter or Jonathan Isaac. With the 12th pick, the Oklahoma City Thunder select Grady Dick. I'm looking to add some shooting to OKC here, who I think might explore trading this pick as some sort of package, but if they don't, I think they'll add a wing player, and ideally I think somebody who's ready to space the floor and shoot threes from day one. This is always going to be imperative when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is your franchise player, but I think even more so in OKC's case, since their roster shooting as a whole is still very much developing. Dick has a safe floor on offense, and he's a better athlete than what he's given credit for. He's not just a three-point shooter either, since he'll be able to attack closeouts too and make decisions. At 12, he's a logical fit for OKC, but I also think that the Thunder will be looking at the likes of Jet Howard, Ryan Rupert, or Bilal Coulibaly here. With the 13th pick, the Toronto Raptors select Kobe Bufkin. The Michigan guard addresses a need for Toronto because he gives them potential 3-level scoring as well as another steady ball handler. There's a lot of questions in the air for the Raptors right now surrounding Fred VanVleet or OG Anunoby around others, but I think they have enough guys on their roster right now who are long and all-around active, but maybe cannot shoot or score too much. This is where Bufkin can come in. He scored 14 points a game this season as a sophomore on good efficiency from everywhere, plus with some passing as well. Personally, I'd be looking at J.G. Jackson here too. He can have that same 3-level scoring potential while being much bigger and longer, but I do think Toronto probably needs a safer draft pick right now who can also really break out. And for me, that's Bufkin. With the 14th pick, the New Orleans Pelicans select Nick Smith Jr. The Arkansas guard had an up and down freshman season. It was interrupted because of injuries a lot, and then the rotation was already kinda set when he came back, so Smith's stock has certainly fallen. That being said, I still think he's a very real NBA player. When I'm watching the playoffs, I want guards who can play both on and off the ball. They can create for themselves, but also spot up or attack openings that another big playmaker creates. In the league, Smith will be able to do this. He's a much better shooter than his numbers indicate, even if his versatility will need to improve. And then he'll be dangerous attacking closeouts with his trademark floater or with a 1-2 dribble jumper. Actually getting to the rim will be the next step for Smith, but the Pelicans are pretty loaded right now. They still need to give Dyson Daniels minutes, for example, so I think anyone they pick at 14 is not going to be in the rotation next year barring a major surprise. Drafting Smith and making sure that he gets back to full strength over the course of a season with a long-term view could very well be the play. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment telling me who you want your team to pick, and as always, if you enjoy the channel, if you want to watch more content like this, make sure to subscribe. Take care, I'll catch you guys next time, and I'll leave you with my full mock draft.